Hi, the second phase banner of version 2.1 is fast approaching, and with it we are getting the return of a fan favorite for a multitude of reasons, whether it be her design or her gameplay. Jingliu was renowned as the best DPS for the longest time, but is that still the case, and is she still worth pulling for? Well, here are 3 reasons why you should pull for Jingliu, and 3 reasons why you should not pull for Jingliu. Before we start, I'll be giving away a supply pass / welcome in / crystal card to my subscribers at 4k subs, so make sure you subscribe to enter. For those that forgot what Jingliu does or need a reminder, Jingliu is a 5-star ice unit following the path of destruction. Her skill does single target damage and gains 1 stack of her talent, her ultimate does blast damage and also gains 1 stack of her talent, and finally, her talent makes Jingliu into a special state after 2 stacks. During this state, her skill becomes a blast attack that consumes 1 talent stack and cannot use basic attack. After characters like Acheron and Adventuring, I'm not so sure this even classifies as a complex kit anymore, but nevertheless, to this day, Jingliu is still one of the most fun and smoothest characters to play. However, does just being fun and smooth make her still viable? Well, here are 3 reasons why you should pull for Jingliu. Number 1. Despite Acheron and Sparkle's release, Jingliu still has competitive damage. Now, while back then there was an argument to be made that Jingliu can output the highest damage in the game, since Sparkle's release for Lune, that is just not the case anymore, and especially after Acheron's release. But despite all that, Jingliu still holds a great standing in the meta due to the abundance of free stats in her kit. Getting really high damage on her is relatively easy. And due to that, for the average player, she's still doing competitive damage even after all this time. In addition to all that, Jingliu was the first DPS that was able to be comfortably ran in content that did not fit her elemental type, because her damage was just so high and the requirements of her damage are not locked behind elements like Lune, whose damage does tank a little bit if not against Imaginary Weak. Number 2. While staying on the topic of damage, Jingliu is still by far the best free-to-play DPS. For those who do not have the spare Js to grab a signature Lycurn or other gacha upgrades, Jingliu is still by far the best DPS for you. At E0 S0, she will outdamage most if not all other characters in the game. This is due to 2 main reasons. The first being the Destruction Path having an incredible free-to-play Lycurn, purchasable from the Herder shop, and second being just the abundance of free stats you get from her talent. Not only does it give you a bunch of attack, but she also gets a whopping 50% crit rate while also increasing ultimate damage. I don't really even need to say much, just the 50% crit rate already speaks for itself. No other character in this game other than Acheron is giving you this much damage in their own kit. This is an absolutely insane part about Jingliu, as while most other DPSs need a signature or a limited 5-star teammate, just slap Jingliu with Bronya, whom you can and should get for free, and you have a team that is capable of 0 cycling MOC and one of the best things for SU expansions, due to both expansions right now having ice weaknesses. Number 3. One major point people sleep on for Jingliu, and honestly Blade too, is their SP efficiency, and what it means for them as a DPS. Being skill point efficient first of all makes them a much more comfortable unit to play. Comfort goes a very long way as you can spend less time worrying about if your damage is online or worrying about sustaining your team, and more time figuring out what you're having for dinner. Jokes aside, being SP efficient also brings another benefit that also cannot go understated, and that is the ability to use SP hungry teammates, whether it be supports or other DPSs. This again goes back to her damage, as using less skill points to do damage means you have more skill points to buff. So for example, units like Hua or Bronya, who definitely struggles with skill point usage, have no problems playing with Jingliu, as she herself doesn't need those skill points. And on the other side, you can play her together with another DPS like Blade, which could lead to a much higher DPS, especially if you have invested a lot into both your Jingliu and Blade. Ultimately, that is all to say, Jingliu's low SP usage allows a wide array of teammate options. But with all that being said, there's one person called Sparkle I have been avoiding, especially during the last point, and one person called Acheron that has been mentioned a lot despite this video not being about her. And that brings us onto the 3 reasons why you should not pull for Jingliu. Number 1. As I said before, Jingliu's damage really only tops everyone when talking about free-to-play or lower investments. The second we start talking about high investment like Edelons or limited 5-star teammates, Jingliu becomes much worse compared to the likes of Lune and Acheron. Now of course, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that Jingliu is significantly worse with investment compared to the others, especially if you're talking about her signature and Ranmei, as those two will definitely make Jingliu do insanely more damage, as her signature is really strong and Ranmei gives her the damage percentage that she is missing from her own kit, but the difference of vertically investing into Jingliu is much less obvious and impactful compared to someone like Acheron, whose signature literally turns her into a monster of a DPS that nothing in the game is even close to. Number 2. While Jingliu's SP efficiency and scaling of traditional DPS stats give her the abundance of teammate options in theory, however the unfortunate part is that her talent really messes up a lot of things for her teammates and makes building and playing her optimally a bit cringe. For example, her turn advance. While it's incredibly nice and fun to use, it can mess up buffs that apply to her turn, like Bronya's skill and ultimate, who despite being Jingliu's best teammate, there is still anti-synergy as those buffs only last for one turn. Meaning when she turns into her talent state and gains an extra turn, those buffs don't carry over because it's a completely new turn. And another example could be Sparkle, who in theory should be incredibly strong with Jingliu and especially with Bronya too, as we can just get infinite turns of Jingliu, but the sad part is that Jingliu's SP efficiency is actually coming back to bite her, as this team, rather Sparkle here actually does less than Ron-Mei, as her turn events and buffs are just worse than what Ron-Mei offers for Jingliu. Number 3. At the end of the day, Jingliu is still just another DPS, especially with what's happening recently in Star Rail. As last patch we literally just got the Lune Sparkle package, and with this patch we get Acheron, not to mention the free Dota ratio. For most players, the need for another DPS is really low, despite the DPS in question being one of the best and very free to play friendly, so unless you conveniently have this unused Bronya sitting around and maybe with a free Ron-Mei and Locha, chances are you're probably better off pulling for someone else, especially since one of the most universal sustain units is literally in the same patch. In addition to the kind of mid banner she's on, with Lynx being really the only one worth getting Eidolons for. But with that said, Aventuring exists, Locha was literally the previous banner, and Fushan's rerun is imminent, so even Lynx isn't that valuable in this context.